This is the EWN Podcast Network.
Welcome to Late Boomers, our podcast guide to creating your third act with style, power, and impact. Hi, I'm Kathy Worthington.
And I'm Mary Elkins. Join us as we bring you conversations with successful entrepreneurs, entertainers, and people with vision who are making a difference in the world.
Everyone has a story, and we'll take you along for the ride on each interview, recounting the journey our guests have taken to get where they are, inspiring you to create your own path to success. Let's get started.
Hello, I'm Kathy Worthington. Welcome to Late Boomers. Today, our special guest is former Army veteran John Lawyer, who is now the co-founder of Kishar, a nonprofit online community where people share their journeys and explore their spiritual paths.
And I'm Mary Elkins. John earned a Bronze Star for his counterterrorism work in the combat zones in Kuwait and Afghanistan. And he was an asymmetric warfare specialist for a special USAF unit there for over 6 years. But while there, a spiritual battle waged inside of him. Many vets need to hear your story, John, as well as those of us seeking a higher path. Welcome to Late Boomers.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Kathy and Mary. I really appreciate it. And I love the message that you guys are putting out in the world. It's great.
Thank you. Would you tell us about what happened to you in Afghanistan or even before you joined the service that sent you on your spiritual journey?
Yeah, for me, I had always wanted to kind of go to the Middle East. I was fascinated by Lawrence of Arabia growing up and watching that. And I read Jack Ryan novels and I was interested in the intelligence community. And so I joined the Army straight out of high school and I wound up at my first permanent duty station after training was about 6 months before 9/11. And so the war started, and then I spent probably half my 5-year enlistment in Kuwait, supporting troops in Afghanistan and our invasion of Iraq. And after that, I became a civilian doing basically the same job that I had been doing, which was counterintelligence and counterterrorism work. Went to Iraq for 18 months, took some time off, and then I spent 6.5 years in Afghanistan. And I think really for me, what really stands out was I was kind of idealistic when I joined. I was a believer and I was young, and as young people are, right? And the longer I was in this military industrial complex, the longer that, it kind of grinds on you and kind of chews you up. And you realize the enemy is not as much the enemy as you think they are. They're just people too. They're just humans out there trying to live their life like we are. I mean, there's bad guys out there. That's not what I'm saying. But, in general, it's not exactly what we think it is. And there's civilians that get ground up in the middle, innocent people. And so it kind of took a toll, over the years. And that I spent 6.5 years consecutively in Afghanistan. And that really kind of tired me out. And
No
I
kidding.
I think it really, that darkness, I think, of all that, what it did is it provided good contrast to the light, right? I didn't see it then. I wasn't prepared for it. And when I came home, I was so broken that I didn't really have an identity. I didn't really know who I was. And it took me 7 years to really heal and figure out kind of what my footing was. And then I kind of had this spiritual moment where I was like, oh, the world suddenly made sense to me. It wasn't something that I wasn't intentionally being spiritual. I wasn't on a spiritual path that I really was cognizant or conscious of, but kind of happened all at once. And it was kind of this loving kindness feeling and a oneness.
After you came
7
home?
years after I came home.
And can you describe that moment, what it was that changed you?
I think there are probably a lot of things that led to it. Prior to that, it wasn't like a spiritual event, but I had let go of things. I had let go of my attachment to what was going to happen tomorrow and what had happened in the past. I had kind of surrendered a bit and realized that I was worrying too much about all this stuff that I couldn't control. And I didn't see it as a spiritual thing. It was, but I didn't know it. And I think that helped. And so then about 2.5 years ago, this was 7 years after I got home, I was in bed with my wife. She was asleep and it was late at night. And like I said, the world just kind of made sense. I felt this very oneness with everything, this like we're all connected. And I kind of knew what my higher purpose was, which was kind of help people help themselves find their wholeness inside, whether they can see it or not, and share my journey, have people share theirs with me, and figure out how to go talk about this with people. So I kind of like that kind of all happened at one time.
Well, that leads
Wow.
me into asking you about your Kishar spiritual community and also what's the origin of the name?
Yeah, the name's important, right? We wanted something that kind of encapsulated our kind of how we saw the world. My wife and I, and a good friend of ours who's another co-founder, and we decided on Kishar, which is the Sumerian goddess of Mother Earth, or Gaia, that divine feminine energy. And it also represents the line on the horizon, which we kind of felt really
Oh,
beautifully shows the journey, that we're all on.
Hmm. Well,
oh,
tell us about your community.
yeah.
Yeah, our community we wanted a place where, regardless of what your philosophy or spiritual belief or religion was, whether you were Christian or New Age spiritualist, or it didn't matter, that you could come forward and practice that on your own and be empowered within yourself, but also have a community where you could share with people in an open-minded and a safe way, a place that's not Facebook or Instagram or some big organization. It's something that's a little more um quiet and private. And uh, so we have stuff like daily meditations and affirmations, that we have discussions about various spiritual topics that um, uh, change from day to day. And what we really wanted was we feel like there's place for meaningful, authentic connection, even in the digital age. We don't have to not have community, because we're all living different places, and we're all more
Hmm.
separated than maybe we used to be from our community. So we felt like there's a place for that here in the 21st century.
It's
And
all online.
is it worldwide?
Yeah, we have people from different places around the world, and it's all online, and it's got an app that we use that we can chat back and forth during the day. We have like Zoom calls twice a week where we kind of have a spiritual roundtable where we just have discussions and talk about things. And I think we also see the importance of the fact that you can't really walk a spiritual path unless you're kind of grounded in your day-to-day life. Like, most of us aren't going to be monks living in the foothills of the Himalayas, right? So
Hmm.
how do
Hmm.
we walk a spiritual path and be aligned in our mind, body, and soul if we're not grounded and centered in our lifestyle? So like health and wellness and relationships and even finances, stuff like that. We feel like there's that intersection is a good place to have a conversation about spirituality.
And is
Mhm.
it membership subscription based? People subscribe? Is that how you work it?
That's right. We have two. Yeah, we have two different monthly subscriptions, and we are a nonprofit. All the money goes back into the membership. The founders don't take any type of salary or anything like that. So yeah, it's a membership to kind of keep the lights on and take care of overhead and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, and we
Hmm.
also feel like with that monthly membership, you have a space that's dedicated. You don't have ads, you don't have trolls, you don't have all this noise in the background, you don't have all this stuff, right? Because it's
Hmm.
like a intentional community kind of thing.
That's really
Mm.
important. And can you talk to
Yeah.
us about what your spiritual beliefs are?
Sure. I call myself an omnist or a universalist, and that basically means I believe in the validity of whatever religion, spiritual construct, philosophy people believe in. I'm there to support it. Within that kind of umbrella, I have my own things that I believe in more strongly.
Hmm.
I subscribe significantly to Hinduism. It speaks to me. I appreciate Taoism and the way of the Tao. And there's some indigenous pagan beliefs from around the world that have helped inform my own practice. And so it's kind of a mix, kind of a a quilted pattern, I guess.
Mm,
I like that.
Um, and
good way to
I
put
what I
it.
really want to do is I want to understand. Yeah, I want to understand spirituality around the world and across time, so that I can have a conversation with anybody about what they believe, so that we can ask better questions, find better answers, and and have a real open mind about it.
Yeah,
Very good.
That's interesting.
Sounds great. Yeah,
it's very
yeah.
welcoming.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
you've
absolutely.
you've mentioned it at times, not here, but I'd like to bring it up. You talk about the stream of unconsciousness. What is that?
I feel like there's all this stuff that we've been told since we were kids that our parents told us, or our teachers, or society, or our community, or our coworkers, or our job, that things that we have to do or can't do, or we have to see things this way. It's kind of like this conveyor belt of life we get put on, that we have to do these things or be part of these things. And so I call it the stream of unconscious because it kind of pulls us down this stream. And it can be a little warm at times, it can be comforting, but if we just kind of stand up out of it for a minute, we can decide kind of what our own beliefs and values are, separate from what everyone has told us. And we can see all this beautiful stuff around us that we can kind of take note of and kind of just take in and absorb. And so it's basically, how do we stop being pulled by all this stuff and these tribes around us and decide what we want and need for ourselves? That kind of
So the
situation.
shoulds and the shoulds and should do's and musts and all of that,
That's right.
and all the
So that,
images placed upon you of what you were supposed to do.
That's right.
and that's what you're considering kind of unconscious, because we're not really thinking when we have those things happening to us, right? We didn't choose them.
Right. It's almost like, yeah, it's exactly. It's almost like we get programmed by society, right? And we don't
Right.
even realize that we're doing it. We don't realize that we're kind of unconsciously participating in life in a way that isn't our own intent, but is other people's intent, you know?
Mm,
Yeah, I do see that around
interesting.
me in a lot of people. How do we navigate the
Yeah.
spiritual path now in this modern age? It's hard.
I think we have, it is hard.
Yeah.
I think we have a lot of noise, right? We have all this noise out there. We have our external noise of our digital devices, our phone, our streaming services, all of that. We have
Yeah.
internal noise of our own inner monologue, our mind and ego, who are really good at what they do. They keep us alive, but sometimes they overperform and they trend a little bit negative because they're always looking to keep us safe. And so
Mm-hmm.
that races. And so there's all this noise, right? And so I think to navigate through that, we have to uh, be more aware. We have to be more intentional about how we're spending our time, about where we're putting our energy, you know, because where we decide to focus and we have, you know, where our mind goes, right? That's where our energy flows. And so if we're more aware of what we're doing, if we're more intentional about what we're doing, then we're going to be generally happier. I think we're going to be generally more at peace and calm with what we're doing.
Do you have any pointers you can give our audience as to how to do that in a simple way for them, since they're listening or watching us?
I do. I think start small. Don't try to start off taking huge steps. Take small steps and think about, okay, how am I starting my day off? You know, when I'm starting my day off, am I here with me right now, like when I first wake up, or am I thinking about all this stuff I'm going to have to do during the day? You know, so first of all, take some time for yourself
Yeah.
and center yourself, be grounded there, and find some peace, and then tell yourself, I'm going to carry this with me throughout the day, and as things come up, I'm going to take care of them. But I'm not gonna think too far ahead, because there's no point in that. Sometimes we need to. Sometimes you have to think ahead, but for the most part, I'm not going to think too many steps ahead because it's not going to serve me. So think about how to stay calm and centered. Think about what serves you. Like if you're doing something, is it something that is helpful to you? Is it something that you need to be doing? Something that you want to be doing? Uh, so I think it's about slowing things down. We have a lot more time in our lives than we think we do. We have a lot more time each day
It seems like there's
than we
no
think we
time.
do.
It seems like you get up and boom, and it's already dark out.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
and
does.
I agree that
Yeah.
if you think about there being plenty of time, there always is time to do what you need to be doing. And we've had
Yeah.
many spiritual guests on the show that have talked about this morning very important on the morning routine. What you start out with during the day
Right.
kind of sets your pattern. Mary and I are both meditators, and
Yes.
any kind of practice though that you keep doing really can set the tone, you know?
Yeah.
That's true.
And that when you're doing that practice, if it's meditation or quiet reflection and you start doing it every day just for 5 minutes, I mean, amazing things happen with these small incremental changes that we do.
Ah,
And it might be hard at first, right? But it
Mhm.
doesn't take long for muscle memory to take over and for it to become a habit.
that's so true.
Right.
Yeah, in fact, we had one gal on the show who her advice was to think of how you want your day to go. Think of one word. And so I picked the word easy. And you wake up to that and you meditate to the word easy, just easy, not with a Sanskrit mantra or anything like that. Just the word that you choose how you want your day to go. And it worked. I was stunned. Anyway,
Yeah.
I may be asking the same question that you just brought up, but you've spoken about being open to the universe. What do you mean by
Mhm.
that?
I think the universe is this amazing thing. It sends us what we need. It will often send us what we ask for, uh, but it won't always look like what we think it's going to look like. It won't necessarily send us exactly what we're asking for in the exact way that we're asking for it. So if we're open to the universe, if we're kind of in this like open and this receptive mode, then suddenly we're going to be prepared to take what the universe is giving us and be able to use it in these constructive ways that make our life easier, that make our life more joyful and more peaceful and calm. And I think that's what's being open to the universe is all about is
Mhm,
having that receptive mindset and perspective on things.
mhm.
Beautiful. Well
So
said.
true.
Well, how do you find your higher purpose or dharma, and what is so important about finding it?
I spend a lot of time talking about higher purpose and dharma, and I think it's probably the most important central thing in our lives because I think each of us have our own higher purpose, our own dharma that we live that is unique to us. That it's going to be something that might change through our lives. It could be different as we get older and as life changes for us. But it's what do we do that is like this thing that is completely aligned with who we are. Like it gives us joy. It makes us calm. It's what we are meant to do in this world that we're kind of walking through every day with everybody else. And so the first thing to do is to get an idea of what that is. And we can pretty well get an essence of it um, by taking some time and thinking to ourselves, what do we love to do? What can I not wait to do the next day and go to sleep and do it again? Um, and so you once you get an essence of it, then you start to know what it is. And then once you do develop fully kind of an idea of what it is, I think we have to ask ourselves, are we living that every day? If I know what my higher purpose is, am I doing something about and with my higher purpose every day? Am I living it? Am I living it aligned with my lifestyle? Am I living it aligned with my job or with my hobbies or my relationships? And if we're not living that higher purpose and that dharma in alignment with our life, we're probably going to be a bit off. And so I think some people, if you ask them what their higher purpose was, a lot of people probably wouldn't understand that right away, and they would have to think about it. And then they might realize that they're not living that every single day.
A lot of people don't even know what they love, except maybe
Right.
their children or their pets.
Right.
That's another issue. Yeah.
No, and I that's radical self-love too, right? Like if I'm not good to me, if I'm not being there for me first, I can't be there for my child or my spouse or my pets or my friends because I'm not taking care of me first. You'll be so much better off and they'll be so much better off if you align with yourself first, if you love yourself first.
Mhm. Well, on that note, how can one let go of all their limiting beliefs and achieve real freedom?
That's a beautiful question. Yeah. that's a hard one, but it's something that we can all do. Letting go is to me, that's the essence of living the spiritual life, probably. Letting go is forgiveness of yourself and others. Letting go is non-judgment of yourself and others. Letting go is having grace for yourself. It's, I think part of letting go is finding gratitude for those things that you do have, because suddenly that helps you let go of all this other stuff. So it's a process, and like forgiveness or non-judgment or any of this, it's not something that we just say that we've done and it's over, right? I can't say like, I forgive myself and I forgive this other person for this thing. You have to it's a process. You have to check back in with yourself. And have you actually forgiven yourself? Have you actually forgiven this other person? Are you living in non-judgment of yourself? Are you or are you judging yourself? And we're always going to judge ourselves some. We're always going to judge other people some, but are we as close to zero with it as we can get? And so it's this process of letting go. And it's all this weight. When people start forgiving, when they start not judging, when they start having gratitude and then grace for themselves, suddenly it's this massively freeing existence, right? Where we can smile and realize that we're not carrying all this weight around anymore, all this stuff.
I think the hardest part of what you're talking about is starting to be aware of when you're judging, because we're all judging from the time we get up in the morning all day long. Every single thing we see, we're judging it somehow. And I catch myself doing it all the time.
Right.
And it doesn't, like, you think, well, that doesn't matter, but it's preoccupying your mind if you're looking at a scene of people and that one's this way and that one's this way. And you have to really pull back and concentrate hard to not do that.
Yeah, it absolutely. And I think you nailed it there, because it is about, how do I become aware of what I'm doing? And how do you become aware of being aware? Like, what causes you to think, oh, I need to be aware right now. I need to be aware to be aware. So that could be something physical Catholics have rosaries and Muslims have prayer beads and the Hindus have the mala prayer beads. And so you've got all this stuff out there that people use to be more aware, but it could be a Post-it note or something that you see in your car or on your desk. It could be anything, but what brings you that awareness to stop judging or to live this more, less attached, right? We talk about them as attachments, all these attachments that we have to stuff that we don't need to be attached to. Some of our attachments are great, like our loved ones, our close family, our friends, our nuclear kind of existence. But all this attachment that we have to all this stuff, all it does is get in the way of living like a better reality for ourselves.
So true. But a lot of people just live by reacting rather than going inside and creating.
Yeah.
What would you say to that?
I think that the act of becoming a person that doesn't react immediately to things is probably one of the most important things that you can do. It's a great thing to bring up, because if the first thing we do when we hear something or see something or feel something is react to it, then we're being controlled by all these external factors. And so if we can just stop ourselves for a minute and say, oh, this happened. I'm going to sit here with myself for a second. I'm not going to react to it immediately. And that changes your whole way that you move through your day, that you move through your life, because suddenly you're not being controlled by all this external stuff all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what is the difference then between spirituality, religion, and self-help? Like, can you give us a little bit of definition there?
Sure. I find religion and spirituality and self-help and even philosophy, I find it all to be the same thing. I think people look at it all as different walled off disciplines or areas of study or focus, but I think it's all saying the same thing in different ways so that different people can understand it. And if self-help resonates more with somebody than philosophy, that's great, or philosophy more than spirituality, or religion more than spirituality, that's good for that person. And then if we realize these are all very similar overlapping things, then suddenly we don't have to be upset when someone says, well, I believe in philosophy and this is my philosophy, but I don't believe in religion. Well, that's okay. or I believe in spirituality. And so if we could all just be more open-minded about these things, and even science being the same thing. I mean, you talk about like base consciousness, and science knows that consciousness exists. It postulates the existence of it, but it can't prove it, right?
Right.
Quantum physicists believe that matter sits on top of consciousness. Probably they can't prove that. So like, if you look at all this different stuff, it's all these different names that we might call it, all these different definitions that we may give it, but it's all, I think we're all pointing to a very similar direction, And I feel like if we could all come together and have a more open-minded conversation, then, the world would be a better place.
I agree with you
From
so
your mouth.
wholeheartedly, because I have had, we've all met religious people who say, I'm religious. I just have this religion. But they're not open to everybody is judged to not be equal to them because
Right.
they only have this rigid set of beliefs and they can't incorporate. They can't say, oh, you're Hindu, it's okay. I'm Christian, but they get so rigid and they can't even acknowledge spirituality of any other type. That's hard.
Yeah, and I think that's it, right? And if you look at religion specifically, you can say if you remove the dogma from it and all the man-made stuff, then you get to the fact the base teachings of each religion are pretty open, loving kindness, being open and not judging your neighbor.
Right.
So it teaches all that, right? So it's basically, if it's a very open system once we take away like the man-made touch points around it.
It's interesting you said that, not judging thy neighbor, but love thy neighbor as thyself. If you judge yourself, then there's no way you can't judge your neighbor. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It all starts with you.
It all starts with you. What would you say to veterans, since you are a veteran? What would you say to them who are suffering from those who are suffering from PTSD, and also people suffering from spiritual emptiness and depression?
I would say that, first of all, I would say that all trauma is the same, whether you're a soldier or a civilian or anything, But I would say, having been someone who's been through PTSD and anxiety and hypervigilance and all this other stuff, I would say that there's a way out. There's a way to peace. It takes time. It takes some work and introspection, but there's help out there. There's community out there. There's resources. I would say don't get lost. Even if you don't think there's light, there's always light. Even if you don't think you're whole, you're always whole inside, even if you can't see it. So I would say there's a way out of the swamp. There's a way out of the desert. There's always a way out. And that's for anybody, even non-soldiers and people out there that think that there isn't a way. And we have choices. I don't say that in like it's not an indictment for anybody, but we all have choices that we make about how we choose to live our life and how we move through life. And we have to exercise the power that we have within us, which is to make whatever choice we want to make and live the life that we can and we're meant to live.
That's great.
Yeah.
What would you like our audience to have as a takeaway today, John?
We talked about it a little bit, but we do have more time. And so I think that's important. Like slow life down, live it intentionally. And I say that in this reality that we all share with each other, there's no such thing as perfect. I think perfect might exist inside of us as that divine thing, or that capital S self, or whatever you want to call the universe, or what it is. So don't chase perfection, because perfection is not worth it. It's just go be good, be great sometimes, but don't try to be perfect. And it goes back to self-love. We have to love ourselves first, and wholly and completely, and then the whole world around us gets lifted up by that. So that's really important.
Well, isn't it the Native Americans who always sewed a mistake or knotted a mistake into their rugs, just so that they would know that it's not perfect and that the gods will continue to bless them?
That's right. I think we covered a lot of stuff, and like I said, our community is very inclusive. It's very opening and welcome for anybody, whether you're a driven professional or a stay-at-home parent or anybody in between. Doesn't matter. If you want to live in your alignment of mind, body, and soul, that's what we're all about.
Fabulous.
It is. Thank you, John. That's great. Our guest today on Late Boomers has been John Lawyer, who went from war zone to spiritual healing and awareness. You can reach John and find out more about his Kishar spiritual community at Kishar, that's KISHAR.org. Thank you, John.
And we are
Thank
so
you so
grateful.
much, Mary and Kathy, for having me on.
You're welcome. And we're grateful to our listeners. And we want to ask you to please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Late Boomers Podcast, where you can watch the video version of our podcast. And also please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And please give us a 5-star review. We're on Instagram at I am Kathy Worthington and at I am Mary Elkins and at Late Boomers. We always strive to inspire and entertain you. Thanks again, John.
Thank you for joining us on Late Boomers, the podcast that is your guide to creating a third act with style, power, and impact. Please visit our website and get in touch with us at lateboomers.biz. If you would like to listen to or download other episodes of Late Boomers, go to ewnpodcastnetwork.com.
This podcast is also available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and most other major podcast sites. We hope you make use of the wisdom you've gained here and that you enjoy a successful third act with your own style, power, and impact.